Okay, so let's try this again. Sorry about last time. The audio was a problem, and I tried to resolve that within the video, but it looks like I'm just going to have to make another video. Hopefully the problem is resolved and you can hear this. If not, I'm sure you'll let me know, and I appreciate that. Okay, so we're reading Allegory of the Cave this week. And so I wanted to talk about the relationship between Socrates and Plato because it's very important to understand that relationship before it will shed light on the Allegory of the Cave quite nicely. So the typical narrative between Plato and Socrates goes like this. The Senate in Athens brought charges up on Socrates of corrupting the youth, of teaching false gods, and of making the weaker argument stronger. They were very serious about their logic. And so Socrates, of course, denied those charges and and said that no, I did not do any of those things, and instead he was just questioning people, just doing what he did. You know, you read about the Socratic method. That was his philosophy, that nobody really knows anything, and he had a very humble approach to learning. The oracle at Delphi said that he is the wisest man in Athens because he knew that he knew nothing. Paradoxically, right? He knew enough to where there's this paradox of the more you learn, the more you know that you don't know. Any expert in their field will also say this, right? My daughter's neurologist, for example, has shared with us many times that there are many things that they don't know about the neurological problem that she had last December. She's fine, by the way, just let you know. My lawyer friends, they will say the same thing. They know that they don't know certain parts of the law, and they know their blind spots. Me as an instructor, as an expert in my field, and other experts in other colleagues of mine know that they don't know certain things, and they have certain blind spots that they need to work on. The opposite of that is called something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where if you learn a little bit about something, then all of a sudden you think you're an expert. You overestimate how much you know. That's not what we're talking about. Socrates knew that he didn't know. However, there is much more nuance, much more complexity to this story than just what I presented. So, Socrates and Plato lived through the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. And Plato actually sided with Sparta. He thought that an aristocracy was a much better form of government than a democracy. Now, I'm going to make this very clear, there is some dispute whether Socrates held that view or not. Personally, I tend to think that Socrates favored democracy. I will adhere to Karl Popper's perspective on this. He wrote a book called The Open Society and Its Enemies, and he does a very good job of talking about the fact that Socrates sided with democracy much more so than with aristocracy. Plato, on the other hand, it's very clear that Plato favored aristocracy. His own uncle, Critias, was one of the 30 tyrants that sided with Sparta during the Peloponnesian War, and who ruled briefly when Sparta took over Athens for a time. When Sparta did take over Athens, it was for less than a year, and it was brutal. I mean, there were more Athenians killed during that time period than at any point in the Peloponnesian War, than all of the Peloponnesian War actually combined. So that's a lot of people that were just slaughtered. But eventually, Athens fought back, kicked out Sparta, and during that time, the Senate in Athens tried to find political enemies, right? So one of those political enemies that they thought was a political enemy was Socrates, because they thought that he was doing the very things that they accused him of. Corrupting the youth was one of those. And one of the ways in which they thought he was corrupting the youth was teaching them that aristocracy was better than Athenian democracy. But Socrates, in my view, again, in my opinion, and in Popper's opinion, and in many other people's opinion, Socrates did not advance those views. He tried to convince the youth that democracy is the way to go. And this makes sense in terms of the way in which he had to escape, or was allowed to escape. Socrates was allowed to escape his prison cell after he was brought up on those charges and convicted of those charges. But if you look at the allegory, he doesn't. Well, the allegory, in some cases he escapes, but in the apology and the death of Socrates, it's very clear that he drank the hemlock and died. If Socrates did believe that aristocracy was better than Athenian democracy, he would have taken the out and left and lived in exile. But he didn't. Socrates ended up drinking the hemlock and committing suicide, basically, because he was put in a bind. If he would leave Athens in exile, it would look like the charges that were brought against him, basically saying that he was in favor of aristocracy versus democracy, it would have looked like that was true. But he didn't want that. He didn't want to make it look like that was true, because it wasn't. He favored Athenian democracy. And so to support that Athenian democracy, to show his support for that democracy, he drank the hemlock and passed away. Ultimate sort of martyr for the truth. That makes much more sense to me, at least, than the opposite, that he actually favored aristocracy and then drank hemlock and died. For what reason, right? It doesn't make any sense. There is a confusion that happens, though, when we look at the life of Socrates versus the character of Socrates that Plato creates. Oftentimes, Plato puts words in the character of Socrates' mouth that Socrates would have never said. Bending towards totalitarian government versus the democracy that Socrates actually favored. But in any case, I think that is the sort of crux of the issue. Plato's elitism and tendency towards totalitarianism versus Socrates' much more humble approach to life and to learning. Plato is very clear that there should be these sort of philosopher kings. If you read the Republic, all of the Republic, Allegory of the Cave is just one portion of the Republic. If you read all of the Republic, he tries to, and by the way, the Republic is a bad translation of the Greek. It's more like the state contract or the Constitution or something like that. But anyway, in the Republic, he tries to lay out plans for this best state, and in that best state, there are many things that must take place. One is that philosopher kings must rule, and everybody must adhere to what they say, setting up the sort of aristocratic rule. And everybody else is kind of a cog in the wheels of that government, serving that city-state. So there are people that serve in the army. There are people that must do these other tasks. They don't get to choose. They just do what the state wants them to do. Socrates' philosophy was much more in line with egalitarianism, equality of people. Plato is not that way. He doesn't approach life with that sort of humility. There are other reasons why I don't like Plato. Actually, a lot of people think that just because I assign an author means that I like them. That's not the case. Obviously, I like Symptoms of Being Human and Jeff Garvin because I think it's important. Anything that leads towards inclusivity in life, I think, is best. But Plato, other people that we're reading, we'll get there later, I don't necessarily agree with. Plato believed in eugenics. I don't think I've ever read of a good eugenicist. Eugenics just means that he felt that you should control for a master race. So you fix the breeding so that you get this master class, master race, which is kind of crazy. He was also for infanticide, which kind of runs counter to the whole thing with eugenics, because if you have a small group of elite people breeding all the time, you're going to get, right? Biology tells us that you're going to get many deformities, right? Both physical and mental deformities. And so being for both of those things, it's like you're leading towards the fact that you would have to then kill children that had mental and physical deformities, which is so sad. Anyway, many reasons not to like Plato. However, The Allegory of the Cave is a very good piece of literature and something that we should take a look at, especially in terms of the rhetorical technique of allegory. So, sorry this took so long, and I'm sorry that the other video didn't work, but I hope that helps to sort of contextualize what we're talking about here with the Allegory of the Cave and the relationship between Plato and Socrates. Socrates, right, taught Plato. Plato teaches Aristotle. Aristotle later teaches Alexander the Great. And I think that it makes a lot of sense when you think about the fact that Plato is sort of elitist. Aristotle kind of takes up that elitism and then passes it down to Alexander the Great and tries to conquer the world. So, yeah, fun. All right, so anyway, why this is important, I think, too, is that it translates all the way down to our time too, with strongmen sort of arising around the world. The most notorious being, of course, Hitler. But all of this, I think, and Popper would agree, kind of sort of harkens back to Plato. But all right, hopefully this video works better, and I hope you have a great night. Okay, bye.